earlier this month, the president received the amended version of the final report on the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture. In a statement, Ramaphosa advised the Speaker of the National Assembly, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, that he would be submitting his response to Parliament. Now, the 76-page document sets out his approach to the Commission's findings and recommendations.
On Saturday, the 22nd of October, President Ramaphosa advised the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, that he will be submitting to Parliament his response to the recommendations of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state. The document sets out the approach to the Commission's findings and recommendations, the methodology for developing the response plan, and the implementation of the response. The President's response outlines the steps government is taking to implement the Commission's recommendations with respect to actions against the perpetrators of state capture and reforms to prevent future occurrence of state capture, as well as broader systemic reforms arising from the work of the Commission.
All right, now let's get some analysis. We're now joined by Tebogo Khaas, the chairperson of Public Interest of South Africa. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So President Ramaphosa will, it's hoped, provide details on the Zondo Commission's 358 recommendations into the state capture to Parliament. What do you think he should urgently highlight as he takes the nation into his confidence this evening?
Good evening, thanks, Unati. You know what I believe the president could do, because it seems to me that there's quite a lot of things that came out of that report that needs urgent attention. But I think where they need to focus on is to emphasize the need to focus on the low-hanging fruits. In other words, those matters that were ventilated in the commission where enough evidence was collected that will ensure that the NPA doesn't have a lot of heavy lifting to do to make them prosecution ready and take them to court. But there's quite a lot that the president needs to do. He just needs to ensure that he gives the public a sense of comfort, because the trust deficit is high insofar as people thinking that the NPA doesn't have the requisite agency to resolve these matters. If you look, for example, the digital vibes issue, it appears that there's a lot of evidence that is out there, but it doesn't seem to have any movement at all. So the president needs to focus on those areas of findings where evidential material has been unearthed, but also of high impact insofar as prosecution is concerned, because he needs to send the message out there that they're serious.
Absolutely. So just talking about, those low-hanging fruits then, I mean, it is an extensive report with fundamental work that has been put into this report. There are concerns, of course, though, about the capacity that law enforcement authorities have or don't have, especially if you consider the gaps, at the, for instance, in the NPA. To what extent would there be, a concerted effort from the president then, to ensure he capacitates these law enforcement authorities? I mean, we know that, of course, the NPA public protector, Koleka Gcaleka, the acting public protector, saying, not too long ago, in fact, to the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services that, the office has a pivotal role to play. And of course, they are waiting and are ready to make sure that, they implement some of the Commission's report and recommendations.
Look, going back to where you started, it pains me to hear government saying they don't have the resources, and ostensibly in most instances they don't have the money to prosecute some of the big cases. Take, for example, the Steinhoff matter. It was an embarrassment to see government taking so long or vacillating so far as prosecuting Marcus Jooste. In fact, they still haven't prosecuted him. All they did to Reserve Bank is just to freeze his assets. Where evidence was there that wrongdoings had been done, and government comes around and says, we don't have the capacity, we don't have money to prosecute some of these big guns. In fact, it is a sad indictment on government, because it's a question of prioritizing issues. Because the Steinhoff matter, the the Transnet matter, the ESCOM matters, and so forth. Those are big item issues where prosecution needs to be done expeditiously to make sure that the message is sent out there. And once you get them right, chance of recovering huge sums of money becomes a motivating factor even for the NPA to go ahead. But yes, the NPA ought to, since the Zondo Commission started about 4 years ago, they ought to have been preparing themselves to say, look, there'll come a time where we need to go after individuals. And these individuals are not going to sit back and say, look, we're not going to fight. They'll fight every way and every manner that they can, and because they'll be using the same resources that they stole from the state. So that argument of capacity, I think, is a sad indictment on government to now turn around and say we may not have capacity to prosecute. The state must have and ought to have more. It should be the litigator of last instance, just as the Reserve Bank is the last bank of instance.
Just given some of the issues, pertaining to President Cyril Ramaphosa in his personal capacity, but also as a sitting president, to what extent do you think that some of the things that, are befalling him in terms of the Phala saga, for starters, and the fact that the ANC is going into the selective conference in December, to what extent do you think that will have some form of influence in terms of what he decides? Of course, we know that, there are more than 200 people within the ANC that have themselves been linked in some way or the other, in the commission.
Yeah, you see, when it comes to Phala, it saddens me when I see former presidents. Well, I would expect that from disgraced former President Jacob Zuma in any event. President Khalima Motlanthe, as well as President Mbeki, still harping on the Phala issue when they know full well that this is the matter that should be the list of concerns or worries for South Africans, given the fact that the president in this instance ought to be the complainant, and if he chooses not to complain, that should be the end of the story. No laws has he broken, other people has broken the laws. But you can see that politicizing Phala, I think it became opportune because of the impending internal elections within the ANC. And we've seen now even the EFF, for example, I watched Julius earlier, who was also harping on Phala, when they know full well that there's not much ado about nothing so far as Phala is concerned. But yes, the president ought not to have found himself in the space in the first instance, because we also believe that as he told everybody, that he was going to create a fund, establish a fund, a blind trust, where all his financial interests will be housed and somebody else will take care of that. Why he would even want to care how much money was at Phala or who did the banking or who didn't do the banking, for me still baffles me. But be that as it may, I think we worry ourselves or we concern ourselves about things that we ought not to be. And in the process, we're hobbling the prosecution authority, we're hobbling the state from being able to deliver, because the opportunities like Julia Maslema will latch on every little thing that will drag the ANC, or in fact, that will drag the president down. They are enabled by even lawyers in our midst, people who ought to know well that some of the matters are not even worthy of ventilating in court. But because they draw fees, they don't care. Basically, those are the BE-Ascaris that we talk to, because they know very well that what they're doing is wrong, but they'll continue doing it because it benefits them anyway. So it saddens me that we get hobbled by things that we ought not to be focusing our time on.
Leaders. All right, Mr. Khaas, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Of course, that was Tebogo Khaas, the chairperson of the Public Interest of South Africa, just weighing in on his expectations about what the president will be announcing this evening.